Hey, let's talk about what product ops is or what product operation is. Product ops is typically a position that sits between engineering, product, and customer success. This position is meant to bridge the communication gaps that very often happen between R&D, engineering teams, potentially with the people that are working more towards the go-to-market side of the business, with the goal to improve communication, collaboration, alignment, and potentially the processes that are involved in those releases of the product. Product ops, as you can imagine, especially if you're in tech companies, somehow related to what DevOps is. So somebody that is taking care of the operations and making sure that the whole machinery that is behind it is actually ready and able to tackle the needs of all the teams involved in the product production, if that means something. So people that are working in product ops are going to have different responsibilities. First of all, they will have to manage the tech stack that especially the product team is using. So product teams usually are going to use different tools for road mapping, for working with engineering, to do their plans, to do their documentation. This can be tools like potentially Jira, Pendo, AHA, Product Plan, Figma, so on and so forth. There's quite many tools that product managers typically use, but there is a very easy problem of tools overkill, of bringing more and more tools to your processes and actually not defining which ones are the tools that you should be using and which ones potentially you should be letting go. You cannot maintain all the different sources of information. It's very difficult when you try to keep roadmaps in different locations or in different tools. So making sure that there is a workflow and a way of working that is consistent across the team. So everybody in that team understands where they have to look for the different sources of information. In many cases, product ops is also going to take the responsibility of quality assurance for the product. So making sure that the product is up to a certain level of quality. And this doesn't mean necessarily that the product ops is going to do the same role as potentially somebody is working in quality automation or a DevOps person is going to be taking, but somebody that understands that are we ready, for example, to launch? Are we ready to move forward in the release of a product? This is the quality assurance that a product operations person has to take into account. How are we with the new features? Are they ready to be launched or are they not? Do they actually fulfill the requirements that were defined in the very beginning? Data is key nowadays for any decision for a product manager or any person working in product. So people working as product ops pay a lot of attention on the data that is available. This can be analyzing the data, different types of data, qualitative or quantitative data, understanding things like NPS, retention or customer retention or feature success, however that is defined, what are the KPIs or metrics that define the success of a certain feature or a certain product. So here you can see that potentially this work could overlap with the roles of other people, for example, a data scientist, that it's actually looking into many of these similar aspects of the data, especially somebody that's focusing more on the analysis part. So product ops is also going to pay attention to the experimentation in the product side. They're going to try to help to make it a smooth process to do experimentation and being able to analyze the results of any potential product experiments that are being conducted within the product team. Product ops are also going to promote cross-functional collaboration between different teams around any topics related to the product, typically when it comes, for example, towards a release of the product. And they will look also into potential areas of improvement. Typically, they are going to be very focused on whatever data it is and what is available. For example, how do we measure the success of our release, the success of the product release, but also the success of potentially the promotion of that release. So how can we look into the data that we have available and find potential bottlenecks that we could address in the future to make a better experience for the users or internally for us to make a better delivery of that product? So what do I think about having product ops people? Do you need somebody to take this kind of responsibility in your company? So the thing is that I agree with all the points that a product ops person should be taking into account. So all the responsibilities that they should be taking, of course, they make a lot of sense and it's something that should be driven within the company in one way or another. The reality is that most of the companies, I believe, are not going to be so big to be able to afford this kind of position. And there are many roles that somehow overlap with what a product ops person is actually doing. For example, the data scientist looking into the data analytics and data insights of different processes. In many cases, product managers are actually trying to drive cross-functional collaboration with different levels of success, of course. QA, quality assurance of new features, this can be taken by different QA teams or DevOps or something like that. So it's not necessarily something that a product ops person has to take. But the reality is that when an organization grows, when you have more teams to work with, when your products get more and more complicated, when you get hundreds of people or even thousands of people developing new code on the same code base, this is going to get a very difficult process to manage. I think in those cases, a role like a product ops, it would make a lot of sense. This is the problem or the benefit of big companies. Roles tend to get very specialized, and then of course the needs of somebody like a product ops makes a lot of sense. So what is your opinion? Do you think that in a small company it would make sense to have somebody like a product ops? Typically, I would say that in smaller companies, especially less than 30, 40, even 50 people, is going to be difficult because there's going to be maybe one or two product managers, depends on the company. And usually companies are not going to invest much more on other roles that are product related. Sometimes there might be a product designer. Actually, from my experience, I haven't seen in this smaller size of companies, probably not even 100 people, somebody like a product ops to be involved. But what are your thoughts? If you have a different experience, let us know in the comments below. I will see you in the next video. Remember, stay safe.